Welcome everybody to 9wax TV and a video you've been waiting on for quite a while. It's a comprehensive review of the Tractive semi-active suspension fitted to my Porsche 996 AKA Little Irish. In my installation video, I said the kit's going to be a game changer for this car. In today's video, we're going to find out in the real world if that really is the case. I just want to say before we get into the meat and bones of this that 9wax TV has recently surpassed 50,000 subscribers. That is such a huge achievement and one that I am so proud of and infinitely grateful of to you, because if you're watching this, you're probably a subscriber. It's also quite fitting that the video marking 50,000 followers is about this car, which is possibly why many people came to the channel in the first place. The poster car of 9wax TV, and in many ways Little Irish is the beacon for the 996 Generation 911, because over the years I think I've demonstrated comprehensively that these cars can triumph over adversity, certainly in terms of the reputation that has stuck with these cars over the years, and that they can facilitate your Porsche lifestyle without going right up the chain for other Porsche models. The Tractive suspension fitted to this car in many ways is an extension of that. So does the Tractive suspension deliver? We're going to look today at the setup I've got, how I use it, and ultimately if it's any good. The Tractive suspension in many ways is allowing greater, not just performance, but also practicality, two elements of suspension that traditionally, with a fixed system at least, have always been juxtaposed, and a complete caveat: if you had one, you couldn't have the other. The Tractive system is designed to change that through the flexibility by being able to adjust the system on the fly. Like, it really couldn't be any simpler than adjusting the system at the press of the button. During installation, it did require, because I've lost like the pocket that would previously be there, that was where I had the telephone connection module for the PCCM Plus system. With my agreement and approval, the guys relocated that around the corner, which actually has worked out really nicely. I just keep the phone in the center console connected to the lead, which is pretty much hidden from my point of view here. So I've pulled over at the side of the road where I can talk through the different settings I've gone for thus far with the Tractive system, because I've spent quite a lot of time playing with it. I can talk that through in a bit more detail and also assimilate it with a kind of Porsche parlance, because I want to be able to explain this with a level of detail while not being a suspension guru or a dynamicist or anything like that, but also for it to be understood by as many people as possible. So I have, as I said, assimilated this within a Porsche parlance. So let me just turn the ignition on so that the Tractive system here lights up. There we go. So what have we got? We've got 5 different saved settings available. Within each of those settings, you can adjust damping front and rear. You can adjust pitch and you can adjust roll. You can adjust each of those according to 5 different stages. So the reality is, this thing is damn near infinitely adjustable. Basically programmed what I believe to be a normal mode, which is also a wet mode. I have then got a sport mode. I have then got a sport plus. I've then got the full fat track, and then I've got wife mode. So for M1, which is normal or wet mode, I've got everything on its minimum setting. And it's worth pointing out, with pitch and roll, when it's on setting 1 of 5, that means off. So you've got off and then 4 different levels of stiffness, whereas the damping front and rear, you can't turn that off, obviously. So you've got the 5 levels or variations of stiffness or softness. Stop laughing at the back. So for M1, that's my normal or wet mode, everything on its minimum setting. This mode is for use when I'm cruising around town. The town where I live, the roads are atrocious. And it's here where the KWs, it's the only area really where the KWs before let themselves down. It's, you know, somebody else is in the car. I was very used to the stiff damping of the KWs, but it wasn't until somebody else was in the car, like my wife or friend or whatever, being bounced all over the show on terrible roads. And that's where the system let itself down. In this setting here, it's at its most supple. So it'll just pander along the road, absorb a lot of the lumps and bumps. Within the context of this being a Porsche 911 and a sports car without air suspension or anything like that, so it's not a magic carpet, but it's in its softest setting, which is softer than the KWs were. Okay, so that is for use for just pootering around town when I'm not interested in sports car driving. I just want to get from A to B in as much comfort as possible. It's also wet mode for, you know, medium speed driving, because you don't do fast driving in the wet unless you're utterly certifiable. With the system in its softest mode, with, you know, as much pitch and roll as possible, that encourages as much weight transfer as possible. You want as much weight as possible to push the tyre into the floor to give you as much grip as possible, in the same way that a aeroplane pilot undertakes a firmer landing in the wet to push the plane, break through that wet surface and to actually make contact with the tarmac to stop the plane from aquaplaning or hydroplaning. It's that same sort of scenario that I've gone for, at least in my head. So that is normal mode or wet mode for M1. M2, we can then tickle things up. Let's go apply here. So there is like a setting where you can just tap each mode, but I'm on the detail of them, so you have to click apply every time you touch them. So M2 is what I would assimilate as sport mode. So just tickling things up a bit. Pitch and roll, we've now got a little bit of action there. So it's on, everything is on stage 2 of 5. For pitch and roll, that brings those systems into play. So we've got a little bit of that on the go. Damping slightly stiffer. Again, within the context that the system is programmed for 911s to be slightly stiffer in the front, as you'd expect, because there's naturally more weight in the back of the car because that's where the engine is. So M2 is just a tickle up on everything to give you a little bit more engagement. And again, like the parameters of sport, I always think with the factory are quite wide. I know people that engage sport mode on a 911 or 2 just to go to the shops because they want a little bit more theatre from the exhaust, and sometimes they want the wing up. So there's a wide bandwidth, okay, of use cases for sport mode. So I've kind of, with that in mind, it's a slight tickle up. It's what I would do for medium speed driving in the dry. Let's then go to M3, which again is my interpretation of Sport Plus. So pitch and roll, we've tickled up one more, so we're stage 3 of 5 now. Damping at the front is 3 of 5 and at the rear is 2 of 5. Now the reason I've not got any further for Sport Plus mode, my interpretation of Sport Plus mode for fast dry driving, for fast road driving in the dry, is because, you know, part of what I love about the 996 is its engagement with the road at road speeds. I like the fact that the car moves around underneath me, and I like playing with the dynamics of that without ever really getting into trouble in terms of speed. So I want to retain that character, which is why I've not over-egged the omelette and dialed out pitch and roll completely. I want some of that in there. And if I want to go faster through turns, I'll definitely turn that up. But if I just want to play with the natural dynamics of the 996 while having a degree of extra focus, I think that's a really nice place to be. Damping at the rear, sometimes I could do with tickling that up to 3, but actually I quite like the fact that there's a bit more on the front because I like a real pointy car. Again, done in twinned with the Geo on this car is super sharp and pointy at the front while being playful at the rear. So far is Sport Plus for me. I think of all the modes, this one's the one that's most likely to tweak and change as the miles go on. Then we go to M4, which is full fat track mode. Everything turned up to the max. Everything is on 5 out of 5. Now you remember Sport Plus mode, a lot of things were 3 out of 5. Damping at the back, 2 of 5 even. Why is there such a big gap between Sport Plus and then track mode? Well, track is a completely different environment, isn't it, to the road? You shouldn't be driving anything like the same on the road as you do on the track. Again, if you are, you're just irresponsible, frankly. So with this, everything is turned up to the max. Minimal pitch and roll because you've got so much more forces going through the car. I want the system to be able to work with that to be as effective as possible. So the car as flat as possible through cornering and as stiff as possible, again, to keep the car planted to the floor as much as possible at all times. There's less likely to be the lumps and bumps on a track, which tends to be billiard table smooth, in comparison to the bumps of a British road. Again, just looking at the environment and how I drive the car every day. In terms of the biggest difference, so if someone jumps in this car and you want to see a before and after, it's M1 or M4, so full soft and then full hard mode. So that's M4, but there is an M5, so that fifth mode is what I call wife mode, and again is important when it comes to the use case of this car. It's the everyday car. If we're going out for dinner or whatever it is, to the shops, it has to work for both of us. Damping is full soft, so nice and supple down the road, absorb those lumps and bumps rather than crashing over the surface. However, pitch and roll, they're at full whack. The idea being, it's almost like a limousine. So when I come to a stop, the front of the car, the nose isn't diving down, it's just staying nice and flat all the way. Same with like roundabouts, if I'm flinging the car round a roundabout, rather than having that roll of car and occupants inside, the car is just staying nice and flat. So it's nice and pleasant for, in this case, Mrs. Sibbs to sit there. I've also, Andy B has sat here and worked on his laptop and not been flung around the place as well. So that is a marker of the system and how good it is, how accomplished it is, and the idea behind it. So that explains the system in a bit more detail. Again, with the caveat that I'm not a dynamicist and that the setup for you can be totally different. You can set any parameters you like in any use cases. The real positive of the system is it gives you the opportunity to dial the car in specifically for your needs and your lifestyle. You should expect that process to take a bit of time while you work it out. And again, I reserve the right to change this after this video's been recorded. So I hope that proves useful. The other thing is as well, you know, in terms of like allowing other people to drive this car, and I'm very happy for Driven Not Hidden collective members to drive this car if they so wish. But, you know, just chucking them in the car and saying, right, go down the road and see how you get on with the system, I don't think is enough time to really get to know it and to understand it. You can put it in full soft and full hard mode to say, well, there are your gateposts, feel the difference. But in terms of really understanding the system and the merits of it and how it can directly elevate your lifestyle and how you interact with this car in the everyday, I think you need to have time to really get to know the system. And it's so worth it because it's very, very clever. And on that note, and in the interest of a fair test, we best perform some manoeuvres that perhaps highlight the differences, again, in terms of goalposts, that this system is capable of delivering. The following clips, I'll demonstrate both braking and cornering in Little Irish in both the softest and firmest settings of the Tractive setup. First, braking, where I shall brake from 60 mile an hour in both clips down to around 15 mile an hour. First, you'll see Little Irish in its softest damping setting and with the pitch and roll functions off. Rather unhelpfully, I brake during the shadow on the road that you're about to see, but you do see the nose of Little Irish dive down under concerted braking, and then you can clearly see when I lift off the brake pedal, the nose rise up. With the same clip, same conditions, same road, I'll again brake from 60 down to 15 just after the shadow, where you'll see a slight dive from the nose, but nothing like what we saw in the first clip. Similarly, cornering, and I'll play these clips side by side once all the way through before stopping halfway. Here's the full clip. And then on the way back, with a freeze frame, the left picture has pitch and roll fully engaged, while on the right has pitch and roll fully off. You can clearly see on the right-hand side there's more weight transfer on Little Irish mid-corner. And that's your demonstration on the road of both the firmest and softest settings of the Tractive setup on Little Irish. So I haven't actually said yet my opinion of this system. Oh my God, YouTube. I love it. And I mean really love it. I mentioned previously I'd kept the KWs in case it just didn't work out and I know I can go back to them. I think I will keep them for a rainy day because you never know, but for me this system just works for me and has definitely furthered my love and appreciation and enthusiasm for Little Irish. Far more dexterous and delivers convincingly on a variety of different uses that this car is ultimately used for. And actually, we're on a good road. So let's go into Sport Plus, my version of Sport Plus, Mode 3. And let's just use this car exactly as I love to use it for. Far reduced, less pitch and roll there. You can feel the car tense up, as I mentioned earlier on. You can feel it not just through the wheel but also in this seat. The car's more stiff, reluctance to roll, which means better contact patch to the floor, which means faster cornering, and it really does make the difference. And to be honest, we're in traffic now. This is a pants bit of road, so I'm just going to go back into full soft. Can feel that wheel relax. And the car, while still being a 911, so again, this is not a Cayenne on air suspension, it's still a Porsche 911 and a sports car, so it's not riding on a magic carpet, but it's nowhere near as intense as it was earlier on that other mode. So, can you tell the difference? Yes. Even down to the simple things, like when the car's in full soft, then you accelerate, the car will naturally go back on its rear haunches, still does in this. Stiffen the car up, do the same thing, and the car just stays flat. The differences really are that night and day in its extreme. I guess in terms of drawbacks to speak of, well, I'd much prefer actually if the screen was just one touch. I think when you're driving along where you want to be able to adjust things quickly on the fly, Porsche, for example, has a wheel here where you don't have to take your eye off the road ahead. You can just twist the mode wheel and it will adapt. And I like that. With this, you always have to have at least 2 touches, and I don't think that's necessary. It's not something that's as crucial as, say, turning off safety control features like traction. It's just changing the suspension dynamics. So having to hit that button twice, I think could be simplified, which is possibly what you want because you're going to be using it while driving. Even like now where I've just got the basic display, to go from mode 3 to mode 2 is 2 touch, because when I hit 2 I then have to click apply. So I think taking away the 2 touch thing would really benefit the user. The other thing is the screen, like layout or location, might not work for everybody. It's worth reminding that the screen surround here is a 3D printed item that the guys did. Looks okay, looks fairly in keeping with the 996's interior. If I was plumbing it into a 997, I'd probably want a better presentation, maybe getting rid of the screws around the screen, just neatening it up really. But again, for my use case here, no problem at all. They're the only drawbacks or observations for improvement really that I'd be happy to recommend. The rest is just honestly superb. Which brings us on to the last point, cost. It is expensive, there's no getting away from it, and it's probably the biggest thing I've had from 996 owners since. The kit is €5,000 plus a day's fitting, plus don't forget as well, you have to make sure that underneath your car is in great condition in terms of all of the arms all around the car. There's no point fitting this to shagged out old suspension componentry. So all in is a significant investment. However, percentage wise, it's around 25% of the value of a decent 996, which is around the same as what Manti upgrades would cost on, say, a 991 or a 992. It's always in that 25% bracket. It's the same here. And for me, what makes a great sports car, it comes down to 3 segments, equal parts on a pie chart. You've got the engine, it's got to be a fun, engaging and performance-oriented engine. Second part is chassis, how the car interacts with the environment and you. And then the third point is touch points. That comes down to steering feel, pedal feel, shift quality. And I do put that as equal to the other 2 because they're the bits that connect you with the car every single time you drive it. So within that chart, where you've got a third of your sports car experience comes down to chassis, well, why would you not therefore have the very best chassis setup you could possibly muster for the car? Now, if you're just going to own your 996 for 6 more months and then biff it off and move on to something else, then yes, an investment of the scale of a Tractive setup probably isn't for you. However, if your 996 or 997 or whatever 911 you've got is a bit of a keeper, or one that you certainly wish to enjoy for a long time, cost per mile, again, this is a no-brainer over the life of the car. As usual then, YouTube, the more you drive, the more you save. So that's it. That's my comprehensive review of the Tractive system. In short, do I love it? Yes, I do. and as I mentioned, has really elevated my love for this car, and I just did not think that was possible. So we'll see where the story goes from here. Certainly, the way I feel about the car at present, there is nothing else in the 911 range I would swap this car for south of £60,000. Genuinely nothing. This is the car for me up until that sort of bracket. So we're ending this video with a picture of an incredibly content Porsche 996 owner who's enjoyed his car for 7 years now, nearly 100,000 miles, and is still finding more ways to just love this car so much. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you, as always, as I said at the top of the video, for your support. Every like, share, comment, and particularly subscription. The reality is, the bigger the numbers, the more exposure we get to be able to share experiences with fantastic Porsche 911 sports cars with you. So hopefully it's a mutually beneficial exercise. We'll see how this story continues with road trips and track days coming up. Until then, we'll see you on another episode of 9works TV.